JikookVerse family, welcome back to JikookVerse. Today, we are talking about one of those moments that can completely change the atmosphere of a practice room without anyone saying a single word. Because sometimes, the most interesting part of a rehearsal is not the choreography. It is the look. The pause, the tiny smile that appears before someone turns away. And when it comes to Jimin and Jungkook, there is something about the way they look at each other during practice that has always been impossible for Jikook fans to ignore. You can have music playing at full volume. You can have dancers moving across the room. You can have cameras focused on the choreography. And somehow, your eyes still find those two. That is exactly what makes this particular practice moment so interesting. The room is busy. Everyone is focused. The choreography is being repeated again and again, with the kind of concentration that comes from trying to make every movement precise. Jungkook is standing there with that familiar serious expression, completely locked into the routine. Jimin is doing the same. At first, nothing seems unusual. They are simply practicing. But then the music stops, and for a brief second, the entire energy of the room changes. Jungkook looks toward Jimin, not dramatically, not like he is trying to get anyone's attention, just a quick glance, but Jimin notices, and that is where things get interesting. Because Jimin does not immediately look away. Instead, he holds the look for another second. There is a tiny smile, almost nothing. The kind of smile that could easily disappear if you blinked. But in a room filled with movement, that tiny expression suddenly becomes the moment everyone remembers. And Jungkook reacts. His expression softens. He looks down for a second, almost as if he is trying to hide the smile that is already forming. Then he looks back. And suddenly, it feels less like two performers checking their positions and more like two people sharing a private joke without actually saying anything. That is the kind of interaction that makes JikookVerse family stop and say, "Wait, did you see that?" Because this is where the story becomes so much more interesting. Jimin has always had a way of communicating through expression. He can say something with one raised eyebrow, one small smile, one glance across the room, and Jungkook has become incredibly familiar with those expressions. So when Jimin gives him that look, Jungkook does not need an explanation. He understands the mood immediately. And that is one of the most entertaining things about watching these two together. Their communication does not always need words. Sometimes, it is simply a look followed by another look. And suddenly, the entire conversation has happened. During this fictional practice room moment, the choreographer calls for the music to start again. Everyone gets into position. Jimin adjusts himself. Jungkook takes his place. The music begins, and for a few seconds, everything is completely professional. Every movement is sharp. Every step is deliberate. Every transition happens exactly when it should. Then comes the part of the choreography where they move closer. Jimin looks toward Jungkook. Jungkook looks back, and this time there is no mistaking the little grin that appears. It is quick, almost playful. Jimin immediately turns his attention back to the choreography. Jungkook follows, but now there is an entirely different energy in the room. The kind of energy that happens when two people are trying very hard not to laugh. And if you have ever watched close friends practice together, you know exactly what that looks like. One person makes a tiny expression. The other notices. Neither one says anything. And suddenly, maintaining a completely serious face becomes the hardest part of the rehearsal. That seems to be exactly what happens here. Jungkook keeps his eyes forward. Jimin keeps moving, but there is a smile waiting underneath both of their serious expressions. Then the music stops again. And this time, Jimin turns toward Jungkook almost immediately. Jungkook is already looking at him. That timing is what makes the moment so memorable. Neither person appears surprised. It is almost as if they were both expecting the other to look. Jimin tilts his head slightly. Jungkook raises his eyebrows, and there it is. Another silent exchange. No dialogue, no explanation. Just two people who seem to understand exactly what the other is communicating. The rehearsal continues. But now, the smallest details become impossible to miss. When Jungkook moves past Jimin, there is a quick glance. When Jimin turns around, Jungkook happens to be watching. When they end up standing near each other, one of them smiles, and every time the other notices. This is why practice room moments can sometimes feel more revealing than big performances. On stage, everything is planned. The lighting is planned. The camera angles are planned. The expressions are practiced. The choreography is rehearsed hundreds of times. But during practice, there is room for personality. There is room for teasing. There is room for spontaneous reactions. And that is where these tiny moments become so entertaining. Jimin and Jungkook do not need a giant dramatic interaction. Sometimes, all it takes is Jimin looking over his shoulder and catching Jungkook watching him. Jimin smiles. Jungkook smiles, and then both immediately pretend to be completely focused on practice. That is the kind of moment that can make an ordinary rehearsal feel unforgettable. And there is another detail that deserves attention. Jungkook's reaction whenever Jimin catches him looking. There is something almost comical about it. He can be completely confident 1 second. Then Jimin turns his head. And suddenly, Jungkook becomes very interested in the floor or the wall. Or absolutely anything that is not Jimin. Jimin notices, of course he notices, and that makes him smile even more. It creates this playful cycle. Jungkook looks, Jimin catches him, Jungkook looks away, Jimin smiles, and a few seconds later, Jungkook looks again. JikookVerse family, tell me that does not sound like the most entertaining practice room situation ever. But the interesting part is that Jimin does the same thing. There are moments when Jungkook turns around and catches Jimin watching him, and Jimin suddenly becomes extremely busy adjusting his clothes, or fixing his hair, or looking somewhere completely different. Jungkook notices, and now it is his turn to smile. That is what makes their dynamic so fun to watch. The teasing goes both ways. Neither one seems to have complete control over the situation. And the more they try to act normal, the more obvious their little reactions become within the fictional story we are following today. The choreographer asks everyone to run the sequence again. This time, Jimin and Jungkook are standing directly across from each other. The music starts. They move. Step by step, beat by beat, and then comes that familiar moment. Their eyes meet. For just a fraction of a second, everything else seems to disappear. Jimin's expression softens. Jungkook's lips curve into a tiny smile. Then they continue. Nothing dramatic happens, no big announcement, no conversation. Nothing that would interrupt the rehearsal. But somehow, that tiny moment becomes the emotional center of the entire scene. Because sometimes, the smallest reactions tell the biggest story. And that is especially true when the people involved are already comfortable around each other. There is a certain ease between Jimin and Jungkook in this fictional scenario. They do not seem to need to constantly interact. They can stand on opposite sides of the room and still somehow notice each other. They can be surrounded by other people and still find a moment to exchange a glance. They can be completely focused on work and then suddenly break into laughter because of one tiny expression. That kind of chemistry creates an atmosphere, and the practice room feels different whenever it appears. At one point, Jungkook makes a small mistake in the choreography. Nothing serious, he immediately realizes it. Jimin sees it too, and instead of making a big deal out of it, Jimin gives him that familiar playful look. Jungkook notices, and the two exchange a quick smile. The music starts again. This time, Jungkook gets the move perfectly. Jimin gives him a tiny approving nod. Jungkook smiles, and that is it. But that small nod somehow feels louder than an entire conversation, because Jimin knows exactly what it means. Jungkook knows exactly what it means. And the moment passes. This is the kind of subtle interaction that makes practice footage so fascinating. There is no need for dramatic dialogue. There is no need for exaggerated reactions. The charm comes from the little things, the timing, the eye contact, the smiles. The way one person reacts to the other without even thinking about it. And then there is the moment when they both start laughing. The music has stopped. Everyone is taking a break. Jungkook says something quietly. Jimin looks at him. There is a pause. Then Jimin starts laughing. Jungkook laughs too. The reason is not even important. What matters is how quickly the mood changes. 1 second, they are exhausted performers trying to finish a difficult rehearsal. The next second, they are laughing like they have completely forgotten how tired they are. And Jimin's laugh makes Jungkook laugh harder. Jungkook's reaction makes Jimin laugh even more. It becomes one of those moments where neither person can explain why the joke is suddenly so funny. And honestly, those are often the best moments, because they feel effortless. There is no performance, no audience, no stage, just two people enjoying a moment during a long day of practice. As the rehearsal continues, their attention returns to the choreography, but the playful energy remains. Jimin passes by Jungkook. Jungkook says something. Jimin looks back. Another smile, another glance. Another tiny moment that lasts less than a second. But by now, the pattern is impossible to ignore. And this is where the title of today's story really comes alive. The way Jimin and Jungkook look at each other during practice is not about one giant moment. It is about accumulation. One glance, then another. One smile, then another. One moment of teasing, then another. All of those little interactions create an atmosphere that feels uniquely theirs, and that is exactly why fans can become so invested in these moments. Because when you watch a performance, you know what you are supposed to look at. But when you watch practice, you start noticing what happens between the official moments. Who looks at whom? Who reacts first? Who starts laughing? Who notices the smallest mistake? Who gives encouragement? Who tries to hide a smile? Those details create a different kind of storytelling. And in this fictional JikookVerse narrative, the story is not about a dramatic confession or a huge revelation. It is about familiarity. It is about two people who seem to know each other's reactions. Jimin knows when Jungkook is about to laugh. Jungkook knows when Jimin is about to tease him. Jimin can tell when Jungkook is trying to keep a straight face. Jungkook can tell when Jimin is pretending not to notice him, and that creates a very entertaining rhythm. Look, reaction, smile. Pretend nothing happened, repeat, then comes the final run-through. Everyone is tired, the room is quieter. The movements are still precise, but the energy has changed. Jimin takes a breath. Jungkook looks over. Jimin catches him. This time, neither one looks away. There is a long second of eye contact. Jimin smiles first. Jungkook smiles back. Then they turn toward the music. The final run begins, and somehow they seem even more synchronized than before. Every movement lands. Every transition is clean. Every step feels connected. When the music ends, everyone relaxes. Jimin looks at Jungkook. Jungkook looks back. And they both laugh. That is the final image of the story. Not something dramatic, not something loud, just a smile shared after a long practice. And maybe that is exactly why it works. Because the most memorable moments are not always the biggest ones. Sometimes they are the moments that happen when nobody is trying to create a moment. A glance across the room. A smile that lasts half a second. A joke that only two people understand. A little nod of encouragement. A laugh after getting a step wrong. A look that says, "I saw that." Another look that answers, "I know." That is what makes the practice room dynamic between Jimin and Jungkook so entertaining in today's story. There is a rhythm to it, and once you notice the rhythm, you start seeing it everywhere. Jimin looks. Jungkook notices. Jungkook looks. Jimin notices. One smiles. The other tries not to. And somehow, the rehearsal continues while this entire silent conversation is happening in the background. For JikookVerse family, that is the kind of detail that makes a story worth replaying. Because you can watch the choreography once and appreciate the performance. But when you watch the interactions, you start noticing the tiny moments between the beats. And those moments can completely change how you experience the scene. The funny part is that neither Jimin nor Jungkook needs to do anything extraordinary. They simply need to look at each other. That is enough to create a moment. And maybe that is why the phrase, "the way they look at each other," keeps coming back. Because eye contact can reveal a lot about familiarity. Not necessarily through some dramatic meaning, but through comfort, through timing, through the fact that someone can recognize another person's expression from across a crowded room. In this fictional story, that familiarity is the heart of the entire practice sequence. Jimin does not need to call Jungkook's name. Jungkook does not need to ask what Jimin is thinking. One glance is enough to start the exchange. And that makes the whole scene feel almost cinematic. The music is playing. The choreography is happening. People are moving around them. But for 1 second, their attention meets. then they return to work. Simple, quiet, memorable, and honestly, sometimes that is more powerful than any dramatic scene, because it leaves room for the audience to notice the details. And JikookVerse family has always been very good at noticing details. So if you were watching this practice moment with us, the question is not whether something huge happened. The question is how many tiny moments you caught. Did you catch Jimin's first smile? Did you notice how quickly Jungkook reacted? Did you see the second glance? Did you notice Jimin trying to keep a straight face? Did you catch the little nod after Jungkook nailed the choreography? And most importantly, did you notice how both of them seemed to understand the other without needing to say much? Because that is the heart of today's story. Not a grand gesture, not a dramatic scene, just the language of glances. And sometimes, that language can be incredibly entertaining. So, JikookVerse family, if there is one thing we are taking away from today's practice room story, it is this: never underestimate a single glance. Because one glance can turn into a smile. One smile can turn into laughter. And one tiny interaction can become the moment everyone remembers long after the music stops. Jimin and Jungkook may be focused on choreography, timing, synchronization, and getting every move right. But somewhere between the counts, the music, and the repetition, there is always room for those tiny human moments. The glance, the smile, the teasing, the quiet encouragement, the laughter, and that is what makes this story so enjoyable. Because at the end of the day, the choreography may be what everyone came to watch, but the little interactions are what keep everyone watching until the very end. And this fictional practice room scene gives us plenty of them. One final time, Jimin looks toward Jungkook. Jungkook catches the look. Jimin smiles, Jungkook smiles back. Then the music starts again, and just like that, the moment is gone. But for everyone watching, it is already unforgettable. JikookVerse family, that is where we are leaving today's story. Sometimes, the loudest moment is not a shout. Sometimes, it is not a confession. Sometimes, it is not even a conversation. Sometimes, it is simply two people looking at each other across a practice room and smiling as if they already know exactly what the other person is thinking. And if you know Jikook, you know why a moment like that can keep an entire fandom talking. This is JikookVerse, and if you enjoyed today's story, stay with us for more moments, more details, and more of the little interactions that make every Jikook story worth watching. Until the next one, JikookVerse family, keep watching closely. Because sometimes, the smallest look tells the biggest story.